Gently close your eyes. Shift your eye gaze to the third eye, or the Jyotishmati, the light of awareness within. Take a deep breath and exhale. Let's begin today's session with an opening chant. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let's offer our salutations to Maharishi Patanajali in our Yoga Sutra study. Yogena chittasya padena vacha malam shariram cha vaidyakena vyopakarotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi. Thank you all for continuing to join in our Yoga Sutra study. What we wanted to do today is we want to continue our discussion on pranayama. Let's do a quick recap on what we covered last week on asanas and dwell upon some of the important recap on some of the important points related to asanas, and then go deeper into a little bit more of a pranayama topic. And then what I also want to do is share some of the different pranayama techniques, and so that we can actually take it to our regular practice in our weekly classes or in our daily sadhana. Any questions before we start? Does anybody have any questions, comments, clarifications from what we covered so far? So, no comments. That means everything is crystal. Just okay. I'm surprised. Sunil Garu, anything that you want to add on the pranayama or asana what we covered?
No, Ji. I think you're very thorough.
I was very actually. What I realized was I made some few mistakes in the last class, and I think in my Sanskrit understanding, I think I flipped some words. So I wanted to actually use this to correct some of those things. Okay, let me start sharing my screen. Did we cover the three gunas before? We probably did not, right? Okay, so there are. I think all of us are familiar with the three gunas. One is the tamas. Tamas actually means it's darkness, it's slumber, it's being lazy, it's in sad mood, and people who have negative thoughts. That is the dark quality within us. That's called tamogunam. And then rajas. Rajas is turbulent action. It's not a harmonious action. Sometimes we also refer that to, sometimes you can even refer that to a Shiva energy, because Shiva is also sometimes creates that what we call as the destruction, but we don't actually call that as a destruction. The destruction is actually leads to a transformation. So sometimes you can actually use rajas to shake things up. When you are doing the disruptions, that's also referred to as a rajoguna. But it's not a harmonious action, but it's a little bit more of a turbulent action. And then the third guna is Sattva. Sattva is clarity. Clarity is in that equanimity. Your mind is without any distortions. You're actually acting in harmony and do that. So every day, in every situation, depending upon what we eat, what mood that we are in, what is the sangha that we have these, we always operate in the mix of these three gunas. We will have either X% of rajas, X% of tamas, and X% of sattva. Our ultimate goal is to build more and more sattva in our actions or in our state of being, so that your mind is in a clarity state. So anything that is born out of sattva, it actually leads to a greater outcome. So that is the first level of progress in the journey, and then eventually we transcend any of the gunas. In other words, all our actions be devoid of any gunas or any qualities, and that's where the highest form of vairagya, which is what we talked about before, which is tatparam purushakyate guna vaitrishnam, or when we transcend all the qualities, even sattva, that's when we become the vishesha purusha. So that is one of the things. So what we're going to talk about today is how these two limbs, the asanas and the pranayama, how it affects those qualities within us. The first thing that we did any questions on the gunas? Is this what your understanding has been in your study?
Yes,
any point of view?
Nothing. Yeah, I have understood the same way.
I see. Okay. So in terms of a quick recap on the asanam, in the asana, a good posture is it has to be born and sthira. First, it needs to be rooted like a tree. The tree metaphor resonates with me a lot. Sthira, sukham, asanam. Any asana practice that you're doing, we first have to be focused on sthira, the stability, where there is no fidgeting, there is no bent legs, and so on and so forth. We are like a tree. And then the next expression is sukham. In that stability, you now have to have the freedom to express yourself. Just like how the tree is rooted, but that stability, that root, it actually gives so much of a joyful freedom for the leaves to express itself. That's how an asana expression should be. Most of us, in our asana, we're always focusing on the movement and the final expression without actually getting rooted firmly. I think that is one of the biggest things that we wanted to take away with. And then every posture, it starts with prayatna, where we actually give 120% effort. Where we are struggling, initially it looks like struggling, but it still needs to conform to sthira and sukham. Without effort, nothing is going to get. We should make sure that all the energies that we have, the energy that we have, go for that 110 to 120%. It also corresponds to the Mihaly's flow theory. When we give 120%, that's when you can actually experience the bliss. When you actually underplay it or even go beyond 120%, that leads to either overwhelming or leads to boredom, and you don't get the results. And then Saithilya, once you have that effort, and then that effort eventually becomes effortless. The more you practice, the sun salutation becomes like a natural movement. You don't feel like it's struggling or standing bow, any one posture. Eventually get into Saithilya. I mean, the same thing can be said of anything, right? For example, I'm now trying to learn some Hindustani, classical music. Just getting some of the notes, the sur, looks like, sometimes it's a challenge. But as you, like many of you, you're trained singers, your sadhana over the years, then it becomes effortless. The effort leads to effortless. When it starts becoming effortless, that's when ananta samapatibhyam, that's when the bliss, you are enjoying, you're actually experience that oneness. And the last sutra about the asanas is tato dvandva anabhigatha. Dvandvas are the conflicts. The conflicts actually map to the rajoguna. The turbulence is result of the rajoguna. So by practicing the asanas, the rajogunam gets suppressed. So whenever you see some kind of a turbulence that's going on in our body, or like angamejayatva, in other words, you don't have right balance, or you have some kind of, the body that's not in control, or your mind is in kind of different conflicts. It's very different than tamas. Tamas is like, the negative, slumber, lazy, and that mode. That is very different. Rajas is, you have disturbing thoughts, you have violence or conflicting thoughts that are not born out of clarity. By practicing asanas, that rajoguna gets suppressed. And then those conflicts will also be suppressed, but they will not be completely eliminated. To be able to eliminate them, we need to do more meditation. Meditation actually improves the sattva. So this is something that we all need to do it. And then by continuously making this asana practice, some of the conflicts in the mind and the body, they will be repressed. Your body becomes more harmonious, you gain more flexibility, you have, energy to do more things. And the other things is, in fact, some of the conflicts in the body, like the tongue versus the stomach battle, what looks like tasty versus what is nutritious to your body, those conflicts will be reduced. So what is nutritious for you will also become more and more tasty for you. So that's the asanas. Now let's look at the pranayama, what we covered. What the first definition of the prana by Patanjali is tasmin sati. Tasmin sati means when you are established in that asana, the sthira sukha asana, when you are enjoying that asana posture, in that asana posture, Shwasha prashvayoho, the inhale and exhale, gati vichedaha. Vichedaha is gati, the movement of the breath, the inhale and exhale. Vichedaha, when it is regulated at one point, using any one of the point, that is what is defined as pranayama. The precursors to doing a pranayama is you have to be seated in an asana, whether it is in the sukhasana or vajrasana, or it could be, what you're doing with standing bow or any one of the postures. So you first have to be in that tasmin sati, in that sthira sukham asanam. Then you start actually doing your the inhale and exhale, regulating at one point in the breath. So asana is a prerequisite for the pranayama. Does it make sense? I think it's very straightforward, right? And then
why? Sorry, I have a question. Rajas is not a bad thing. It brings duality, but I think Rajas helps also to create Tamas. I agree. Nobody wants to be in that, but unless you're on vacation. But I'm saying Rajas, I think you want that because not all the time. Yes, it does bring duality, but I think without Rajas, not excessive of that. I think I would say I would balance between Tamas and Sattva and Rajas, because without Rajas, there is action becomes, with the combination, you have a direction and you have a ability to do the action at the same time. Is my understanding wrong? I don't know. I'm not.
I think it's partly correct and partly incorrect. So the thing here is Rajas doesn't actually mean action. Action is actually it's kind of an orthogonal. Any action could be.
It's a fire. It's a fire which creates it's the burning fire. That's my understanding, not the action.
Yeah, Rajas is actually disruption. It's a turbulence, right? So in fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, I think in the 14th chapter, they actually go deeper in Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga or something. That's where they actually describe all aspects of what is a tamas action, what is a rajas action, what is a sattvic action. And then they also talk about, the three types of food, the three types of actions, the three types of, qualities, the three types of pujas, all those things. The tamas, rajas, and this is more of a state of mind action. It's and that you can actually measure it in, whether it's an action, it's a type of food, and all those things, right? But what it actually means is you can actually engage, sattva action is also there, or tamas action, like Ravan is a tamas action, right? So my understanding and the interpretation is rajas doesn't necessarily mean the fire. Fire is actually the fire is the energy to do an action. It's just that how your state of mind, your being is, that determines your gunas. And the thing is, Rajas is not always bad, actually. Rajas is probably needed to create a transformation. Like when you're doing protests or when you're fighting a war, that's a conflict, actually. But if that war is rooted for a purpose, like, fighting a tyranny, or even like, perhaps in a Kurukshetra was a war, that is born out of conflict. Yet, and in fact, we equate that to like what I was saying earlier, Shiva. We always equate that to Brahma is the creative force, and then Vishnu is that sustaining force, and then Shiva is the destructive force, or that. But actually, we actually call that as a transformation force in that in the cyclical life cycle, somebody would have to, only when you actually destroy it, that is the source for the new beginning, the hit refresh. So it's actually kind of a, Rajas could also be deployed for a good purpose, to create a transformation outcomes, to disrupt the status quo. Am I making sense? Or it's like, at least that's the type of a lens that I have.
I think, one other way I understand is Sattva is like water, Tamas is like ice, and steam is like Rajas. So there is a lot of turbulence in Rajas. Means too much energy, but it's all turbulence. So it doesn't lead to any productivity. So Sattvic still has energy, but it is a streamlined laminar flow. It's a stream. It's a stream. So that's why the thoughts are very parallel, or any action is parallel, and so it's very smooth. But still there is energy there. Where Tamas on the other hand is obviously the exactly opposite of Rajas. Basically, there is not much. So it's like a ice. It's like I just basically my understanding.
I think that one. I think that metaphor kind of makes sense, perhaps, but it's more of a structural definition. But I don't know if I can quite resonate with that. What you just said perhaps equates to what Savita ji was also saying, because you need to have that steam to create locomotion. Like, the steam is what is the deployable energy, actually, whether it's a combustible engine or so on and so forth, right? But water by itself in the pure form, I mean, you have to heat it to create the thing, to actually use a deployable energy. I mean, I think, we can contemplate on that, but at least, let me close it here for now. Say that this guna is just a state of mind, and then it's kind of an orthogonal dimension to whether it is the form of energy or the food. I mean, in fact, like a tamas, like, the tamas food is like, what you eat out of the fridge, or the one that, is stored packaged foods is tamas food, or eating meat, that stay for a long time. Because that actually, that food creates that quality within you. I mean, in fact, the thing is, anything that is stored in the fridge and when it's microwaved, they say, right, the prana is lost. The prana is lost. And then what it does is, eating more of that food, it actually clogs your mind, avaranam, that creates a smoke. In fact, that's the benefit that what Patanajali said, which we covered last time, which is the benefit of pranayama is tatakshiyate prakasha avaranam. Avaranam is that smoke, that's the tamas that's covering our mind. By practicing pranayama, we actually suppress that tamas. That the dark, stale, lethargic, negative energy in slumber, and that will be this. But the interesting thing is, the way this system works in our body is, it's a combination, the tamas, rajas, and sattva. And one of the things that we want to walk away is why we always, in our practice, we always need to combine all these pieces together. Asana, pranayama, meditation. What happens is, if you only do asanas, right? Because think that, this is what is I need for the physical body. What happens is that actually suppresses the rajas. Then you don't know what is going to fill that dimension. That could even be filled by tamas. One that is suppressed, the others will actually fall into it. And depending upon what mood that you're in, the tamas may take over. So after doing it, just a practice as the physical practice, the people who are doing the physical practice, they may only focus on the physical practice without pranayama and so on and so forth, or meditation, they may become more violent. So that is extremely important. And even some of the things that we will say, right, whenever, if we only have short time, what gives up? Either pranayama or meditation. And what we have done is, in fact, that is a lot of very experienced yoga teachers, what they say is like, that's one of the most irresponsible idea, actually. Don't just do the physical asana. Then what you're doing is you suppress the rajas, then you're giving an opportunity for the tamas to take over. Then what happens is you have all this thing that you've done it, but all the actions that you do are born out of tamas. So it's extremely important to balance our thing. And what we also discussed last time, right? Your pranayama needs to be at least twice as long as to what the asanas are. And then the meditation. So your meditation is also as an integrated thing. And then, Any questions or comments? Does it make sense? The combination of how this system works.
Yes. So let me. Someday I'll pick some infographics. Actually, I'm away from my computer. Just one liner to close on it is. I know we have discussed long time on this one. So coming to Ayurveda, they go very deeper onto these aspects as well. And the reasoning here is, it is the sama rajas that we are needing, in the sense, when the rajas becomes high, it turns into acne, inflammation, hemorrhoids, right? Eyes burning and all that stuff. So when you look at this vata, pitta and kapha, right, the combination of these three gunas, we cannot, let's say, tamas cannot be undermined in any form, because if there is no tamas, then we cannot sleep the 6 hours that we sleep, right? So at some point, because it's all about, we always talk about being illuminated, light, and all, and so all these three gunas in their samatva do a great job, but it is when they go beyond, right? The kapha, if it becomes more, or the tamas becomes more, then we become dull with it. But if it is not enough, then you cannot sleep. And there are so many other things. So ultimately, it comes to a point where everything is pujaniya, right? All these gunas. With that, I will close, and I think someday we will pick it up. So there's nothing to undermine on any of them, as long as they are working in their proportions as needed for the situation, for the purpose of it.
Yeah, actually, that's a beautiful point. On that note, let me invite you, Ramakanji, perhaps next Saturday, if you could, do a session on Ayurveda and this gunas and with the Vata Pitta Kapha. I think that Samatvam state. I think that would be
just a small one. Just we don't need a long time like we discussing now. Just a 5-minute stuff. Just give out the infographics, and then let them settle with it, and then again pick it up 2 more weeks later. How to understand?
Yeah.
Right? Because there is unlimited. You can go with these, but we can do a very simple 5-minute, 7-minute one.
Yeah,
sure.
I think well, that's an important one. I think let's definitely do that. And then what I would want to do is let's quickly go through the remaining points. I think there are some things that we want to make sure that we get it right. One is so one is we talked about, sorry. Yeah. The pranayama as defined by Krishnamacharya Guru, the way he said is prana is prakarshena anati gacchati tasmat pranaha. So the one that actually illuminates us, that brings clarity and excellence, the one that brings clarity in us, and anati is the one that actually brings heat. Prana is the one that actually energizes, the one that actually gives us the heat, and gacchati is that also creates movement within us, is tasmat pranaha, right? Prana is very different from breath, actually. In fact, there are so many other sources of prana, not just the breath alone, right? Like food is a source of prana, meditation is a source of prana, satsang is a source of good prana. So there are many sources of prana. It's not just the breath. That's why pranayama is not just about the breath control, right? Of course, there is one technique that you can actually do it, but the sources of prana are manifold. The food that we eat, to the sangha that we have, is all contribute to the right prana within us. Right. And then the other thing that we talked about is the prana has 9 different stages. Bahyabhyantara stamba vrittihi. There are 3 types of the acts of prana. One is bahya vritti is exhale, abhyantara vritti is inhale, stamba is holding. Those are the 3 acts of prana. And then what you do is you basically focus on desha. You basically focus your attention or use one of your body parts. Desha is one place in the body. Kala, you also regulate based on the time, how long do you do pranayama, or the how long you actually inhale, exhale, and hold. And our target actually is, what people say is, and then we'll cover it. And then the number of repetitions that you actually do, and then it also all pradarshito, being in awareness of this movement, being a witness to that breath. And then dirgha sukshmaha, it needs to be long and steady, sukshma, it needs to be subtle, right? Smooth and subtle. So that is what is a good pranayama technique. And what I've noticed is, in fact, when I first joined the Art of Living in 2007, in all the different pranayama, they had some counts, and then they would say like, you need to do 4, 6, and 4, or something like that, 4, 4, 6. But the thing is, that's only for the beginners. Eventually, what you do is, in the pranayama, it's all about elongating your count. It is like, there is no fixed thing of, only do it for 4 seconds or 6 seconds. In the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, what they basically say is it's 1, 4, 2. If you actually do it for 4 seconds or 4 counts, then you hold it for times 4, and then you exhale for times 2. So there is only a proportional measurement, but there is not a fixed amount of about whether it's a 4 counts or 6 counts. That's only there for the beginners, for the simplicity. And I've seen people where they actually do one cycle of pranayama there are some people who do it for 30 minutes, or some of those siddhis that you can actually get. That's how people can stay under the water for a long time. Or but we all can actually increase our lung capacity or the pranayama capacity to actually do the dirgha and sukshma. And one of the finest thing that I learned in one of the classes is, apparently our lifespan, this physical lifespan, is God gave us a quota of number of pranas, number of breaths. It's not about number of days or number of years. We all want to live either for 70 years, 100 years, 40 years, and so on and so forth. But apparently we all have a quota of number of breaths. So it's basically like, however you want to use it. You can actually breathe faster, quickly with smaller counts, and then you're going to burn your quota. The best way to the pranayama is actually, you can actually conquer the physical mortality. The way you do that is use your prana very wisely. So if you can create one cycle, let's say for 2 minutes, as opposed to 10 seconds, then you actually extended your life by X number of times. So that is one secret of why pranayama is so important, to increase your vitality and to increase your exuberance. Did you all hear this? That our life quota given by the God is not number of days, but number of breaths?
No, I had not heard.
So
I thought it was more of a Surya, like each sunset we see.
Oh, I see. So whoever wants to live longer, please extend your cycle. Just like, for you, the quota is like, inhale is 10 counts, hold, and exhale is 10 counts, right? But that one, I always found it very fascinating. It makes a lot of sense. I even, in fact, shared it with some of my American colleagues, and they were all like, oh my God. And then they became more aware of their breath, instead of doing this rushing breath whenever they're in a conflict situation, they became more aware of, okay, I want to save my breath quota. Particular sales guys who are very familiar with this quota business, they can resonate with this language, right? So, and then the next thing is actually directly relates to Advaita and Vedanta, which is from the Mandukya Upanishad. What Patanjali defined is, he defined the 3 things, which is like exhale, hold, and hold the breath, and then inhale the breath. Those are the 3 stages. But for Patanjali in the 2.51, in the 51 Sutra, he also said, Bahyabhyantara Vishayakshepteha. What it actually means is, after the exhale, you don't have any breath, but holding that state is defined as a 4th one, right? And but this one, you actually see this happen more spontaneously in some of the practices. Like, for example, in Sudarshan Kriya, you go through very cyclical, different rhythmic movements of your breath, which is like long cycle to medium cycle, and then short, quick, cycles of the breath. And you do that for about 20 minutes. And after you go it, and there is an element of your breath stops. And your breath is directly linked to your mind, how your mind behaves. So the breath follows the rhythm. And when you are training the breath to follow this rhythm over and over, after some time, the breath suddenly, the breath stops and the mind stops, and you are entering into the state of no thought. And that is what is known as the Chaturtha. And this is something that we tried exploring that, but for that, what we need to do is we need to do the Kapalabhati for at least 60 counts. When you do the rapid exhale and the Kapalabhati, you actually can get into that state where suddenly the breath stops. Or even Bastrika, if you do for a long time, or Shambhavi Mudra, before you get in the Shambhavi Mudra, they actually make you do the regulated, the rhythmic, different kinds of breaths. And then after that, you enter into the state of where the breath stops and the mind stops, and that is that quick glimpse of that is the state of Tureeyam.
How long before you get, how long before, like now I still get lightheadedness. So how, I mean, I'm sure it's body to body, there's a difference, but I feel there's a lightheadedness when I do that, especially. So will it eventually go away, or is it something that should not happen? I'm not sure.
I think, it probably will go away. I think, it actually probably, when you're getting a lightheadedness, that's probably more of a dvanda that's perhaps related to more of that physicality aspect. So the more you increase your asana practice, that will go away. And then, then when you couple that with the pranayama, I think that's when, you can experience perhaps a glimpse of the Chaturtha. Right. But the thing is, what it actually, this sutra has, so much. I mean, the literal sense is the fourth state is, which is Kevala Kumbhaka, which is like holding the breath after you exhale. That's more of a literal sense. But the reason why Patanjali defined this is also the four states of reality. So in other words, what Advaita believes that is, whatever we believe is this awakened state, the Jagrati, it's also a dream. It's also a dream. It's like that Matrix movie. And then there are three states of virtual reality. One is this, what we perceive as an awakened state, the Jagrati. And then the second one is Swapna, which is the dreamful sleep, or, in the sleep hygiene, we call that as a REM sleep. And then Sushupta, which is like the dreamless state. And the dreamless state is the Sushupta. That is, there are like, three states of reality. And when you are in the Swapna, we believe that is actually the real, which we think that, our heart, goes through, the perspiration and all this thing, depending upon the type of dream that you have, right? So what we believe, there is this, Shankara calls this as adhyasa. Your mind actually creates a superimposition of a reality. And that's what creates this illusion that this is actually what we think as a reality that we perceive through our eyes is actually a virtual reality. That is not the true reality. Or just like when you are in a dream, what your mind projects you is, you believe that is actually a reality. And your heart and blood and everything actually moves. Just like what we are now seeing is, this is also another dream. And this is not the real thing. Right? What they basically believe is there is actually a persistent reality. That is what we need to connect with. That's what we need to realize, which is known as the Tureeyam, that fourth state, which is actually the pervasive state. That Satchit, the witness that's always on, that is actually shining the light on your illusionary awakened state, the dreamful sleep and the dreamless sleep. That is all simply putting the light on all those things. But we are not, we are the lamp or the light, but we are not the screen. What we assume as a reality, I think, Ramakantji actually has a nice metaphor about lamp, projector, and the screen, which is like, we look at the screen and we assume that is a reality. Just like, when we are in the dream, how we perceive that as a reality in the dream sleep. This in itself is also another virtual reality. So in fact, actually, I'm reflecting on it. Even our Elon Musk, he's also slowly becoming a spiritual dude. Someday he's probably going to cover more distance beyond Mars once he becomes more spiritual, once he starts becoming more inward. Right now, he's trying to go externally, Bahiranga Sadhana, to go to Mars. But someday when he turns inwards, I think he can, travel, he will make an interstellar share. But I think, what he even said, in one of the things that he said is, this entire thing is a simulation. And it is like, this is nothing but a simulation. This is nothing but a video game. So there is something that is Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. He's actually getting that sparks of wisdom. Ramakanji, anything that you want to add? Do you think, what Elon Musk is saying kind of equates to Vedanta?
Yeah, I was only listening. I posted saying I may not be active. No, not much. I did not read at all. I only saw Sadhguru's comments when somebody asked him about
I see.
Sadhguru. I saw that interesting comment, but no, nothing. It's all about, I think, I'm not sure. I mean, the inner world, right? The insideness is so amazing. And once we look at every nook and corner within our own system, I think the inner cosmos, the more we put a more brighter light on it, not just this planet or that planet, outward, I think we can understand anything and everything.
Yeah.
Right? And being with some unbelievable masters, I've seen them talking about, hey, this is some precious stone from some other planet, and all those too. So they can, it's just a mass energy conversion. So simple. It's so very simple. But I become that converting mechanism, right? I become so transparent. The uncoloredness of my colored thoughts, once it becomes starting to become zero, entire dimensions within me open. With that, back to you, Sri.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think that's the next limb, which is like once you start becoming more pratyahara, when you start becoming zero in your outward perception, and that's when the real dimensions start opening. So that's what we always say is like, that's the 10 philosophy. It's like this, the more you become zero, the more you progress towards one. So we only have to put an effort to become zero with our ego, intellect, and buddhi, and all these things. And then the dimension towards one, the infinite, it actually happens. I think that's a very fantastic thing. We actually perceive this in a thing. I think we can actually get a small glimpse. When you do any one of these practices, whether it is Kapalabhati Kriya, or whether it is the Sudarshan Kriya, or any one of these practices, or Shambhavi Mudra, we actually had an opportunity to glimpse a little bit of the Tureeyam. And in fact, some of you who've been part of that other session where we talked about 9 strategies to overcome obstacles, Patanjali actually linked two strategies even in the first chapter. One thing that he basically said is, the one way to actually remove obstacles or the miseries of the mind, the kleshas, is Swapna Nidra Jnanalambanam va. Once you understand the wisdom of what is a dream and what is real, what is sleep and what is dream, then you will actually understand, there is no reason for you to be stuck in any dukkha, because, this dukkha is all part of the adhyasa, is a superimposed reality. So what you think is a pain or pleasure is only in the video game. So it's just like the movie. So that's what he says, in a very, subtle way. It's like Swapna Ridra Jnanalambanam Bhav. So that's exactly comes back to the 3 states. And what Mandukya Upanishad actually covers is, they define this Om. The definition of Om is the entire cosmos. But the Om also, they equate this is to 3 states. The A sound maps to the Jagrati, the U maps to the Swapna, and then the M maps to the Sushupta, which is the dreamless sleep. And then the silence beyond the Om is the Tureeyam. And that silence is the universe, of the cosmos vibration, of the transcends the vibration, that is the Brahman. And going back to Ramakanji, what you basically said is there is a very popular, very famous talk by Vivekananda. It's called microcosm and macrocosm, right? Which is like, the outer cosmos that you see and the inner cosmos that you see, like the Brahman or Brahman and the Atman. They are one and the same, the microcosm and the outer world. And that also is a very, very profound talk. And if you're interested, you can also listen to the Sarvopriyananda's talk on microcosm and macrocosm as explained by Vivekananda. That's a very, very profound talk. Right? And then moving on, did anybody get a chance to, or did anybody explore Mandukya Upanishad? It's a very small Upanishad. And when I connected that to these 3 stages of breathing and why Om meditation is so important, to be able to, the Om allows you to connect with Ishvara. And when you start unifying with the silence beyond the Om, and that's when we actually transcend the Ishvara, transcend the manifestation, to even transcend the Ishvara, to unite with Atman and Brahman, which is the real identity. Even the Ishvara also is a manifested Saguna Brahman or something like that. So it is a very fantastic intellectual exploration. So I don't know when it becomes in our perception. Did anyone get a chance to read or contemplate on Mandukya Upanishad? If not, I would encourage you.
Yes, G, I think there are some videos from Sarvopriyananda on this Mandukya Upanishad for many hours. They are very enlightening to listen.
It's very enlightening. Actually, I got exposed to somehow accidentally. I got exposed to Sarvopriyananda during COVID time. He opened so many doors, and I was like, my appetite was there. The way he explained Ashtavakra Samhita, Mandukya Upanishad, Brahmananda Valli. It's like he's just a vast ocean of knowledge, and the way he connects in a very contemporary way to all these other scientific explorations, like Mihaly theory, to Einstein's relativity, and even connects it to Mount of Sermon from Jesus Christ and so on and so forth. He is an ocean of knowledge, making all the right connections. I think that's a very powerful resource. And the next one is, now let's quickly touch upon the benefits. The first one we talked about it, tatakshiyate prakasha avaranam, which is like, the tamas, the smoke that is covering our mind, the sattva, which is basically what happens is, by doing the practice of the pranayama, we actually bring the vitality, and we reduce the tamas. So it's extremely important to practice pranayama. And then there is a second benefit that Pranayama says. What it actually says is dharana sucha yogyata manasaha. Dharana, which is the first limb in the antaranga sadhana, which is the concentration, the mind's ability to concentrate and focus. By practicing pranayama, our ability to focus and concentration improves. Dharana sucha yogyata manasaha. That's the second benefit of pranayama. So particularly for all the kids, one technique that we need to teach them is pranayama. This is something that is, particularly people with, attention disorder. Unfortunately, we now live in a world of weapons of mass distraction. And there is a famous saying, when your mind is in pieces, like scattered pieces, in all these multiple distractions, you will never be in peace. So pranayama is that tool where we can actually use it to build the mind's ability to focus and attention. So pranayama is a very, very important technique. So that is the second benefit. Dharana sucha yogyata manasaha is another great skill of one of the great benefits of pranayama as defined by Maharishi Patanjali. In fact, I can actually vouch for that. Even still, I have some of these distractions, but any time that I have it, I always anchor myself into Ujjayi breath, or even just a Shambhavi, like, alternate nostril breathing, just being an awareness of it. The breath always brings the clarity and try to bring in that moment. Any comments on, would you agree? Dharana sucha yogyata manasa, pranayama directly builds the concentration.
Yes, G. I think, one thing I would say from a neurology standpoint, we don't have access to our mind. We have no clue where the mind is in the first place. Okay, we pretend we know the mind. So, but we can't control the heart, but mind controls the heart. Breathing is the only thing that we have access to mind through. So we can access the mind through the breathing. So because this is called vagal nerve, right? We talk about vagus nerve and all those things. So at one of the conferences on epilepsy, I was just, without giving the terms like yoga and everything, I was just referring to, like, there is a device called vagal nerve stimulator. So what it does is it stimulates the vagus nerve to treat epilepsy, and it is now used for depression, OCD, PTSD, and all those things. So they were all like big guys from universities talking about what it does and all those things. But somebody asked, how does it work? They said, we don't know. So I said, okay, maybe I'll just give you some idea. Think about it. I said, we are improving vagal tone, and meditation does the same thing. And pranayama does the same thing. And we know a lot of evidence that meditation improves seizures, and maybe it is a Western mode of meditation, which is an electrical stimulation of the nerve. So everybody there said, wow, that makes sense. So because we are accessing the mind, the calming portion of the mind, which is a vagus nerve, through the breathing, because this is the only one where we can actually manipulate. Heart rate, we cannot manipulate. GI movements, we cannot manipulate, but they're controlled by vagus nerve. We can't manipulate it. But breathing, we can manipulate. It's both voluntary and involuntary, both.
Yeah. Actually, the way you said it, and for many of you, Dr. Sunil is a very renowned doctor in our community. I mean, hearing him also, bringing the yoga philosophy into science. I think this is where what I also understood is people are now only in the last 5 to 10 years, or probably a little bit longer, people are now trying to understand what is consciousness. Because they always equated consciousness to just the mind activity. They thought everything is by, what Sadhguru says, right? Everything is known by cutting it up. And then what they realized is by cutting it up, you cannot actually understand the thing that is unifying force. You cannot divide and figure the unifying force. So that's a greatest thing. And the other place where I read is our understanding the mind and the psychology was very much of a Sigmund Freud kind of an approach. And that is very divisive, and he was trying to study, from what I understood, he was trying to study more of a negative behaviors, and then he was doing it. Whereas our older saints, they were studying more consciousness and the positive, the way they actually went into the deeper levels of the shades or the layers, and to really understand the consciousness stuff. And one other interesting thing that I read from one of Shri's books, he equated this breath and mind connecting to Ramayana. Actually, it's a very simple thing, which is like, Rama is the self, Sita is the mind or the buddhi. When you lose control of Sita, when you lose your Sita, take the helm of Hanuman. Hanuman is the prana, is the breath. There's a very simple Ramayana told in a yoga philosophy, which is like, when you lose your Sita, when you lose your intellect, take the help of Hanuman. And there's the breath. I mean, I found it very, very, very profound, that simple one line of Ramayana equating to pranayama.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, never heard that before.
So we always have to, so take the help of Hanuman to get our Sita back. Right? So we're a complete Ramayana by ourselves. We don't need to look for another Sita or Hanuman. Everything is there within us. The whole drama is within us. So let me conclude that. And if you have some time, we can also talk about the different pranayamas. But at least let me talk about the three things. Are there any other things that anybody would want to discuss? Okay, there are at least the 3 or 4 pranayamas, the 4 or 5 pranayamas that we always practice. One is Ujjayi. Ujjayi is actually the victorious breath that we practice, where we breathe from the glottis area, the back of the throat. And that is one of the most energizing breath that immediately brings you into the current moment, and it brings so much vitality to it. Right? Ujjayi is the victorious breath. So anytime when you're going into a meeting or meeting or any 10 situations, always do about 3 or 4 deep Ujjayi breaths, And I think, you immediately get centered. And then we do the alternate nostril breathing. And I think all of you are Anulom Vilom, or it also called the Nadi Shodhana Pranayama. Nadi Shodhana, which is like, you have your left nostril and right nostril, and you try to balance both energies. One of the, when one is the fire energy, the other one is the coolness, and one of them is actually scientifically, and Sunil Garu, correct me if I'm, one of them is connected to the left brain, the other one is connected to the right, hemisphere of the brain. So one is responsible for your, creative force. The other one is just a logical, analytical thinking. If you're lopsided on one side, if you're too logical, and if you don't have the creativity or the emotional brain, then, you just become a scientist, and you cannot, have, more creative expressions or other dimensions. So what Nadi Shodhana is, it actually balances these two forces where you have logic and analytical. And that also, that is one of the benefits of the Nadi Shodhana, or the fire and the coolness, right? It is like, in fact, if you observe it, most of the time, if you actually put your finger under the nose, you're only breathing through one nostril most of the time. Either you're breathing through the right nostril or the left nostril, where you're like hot, the other one is, this. So where you can actually, with the Nadi Shodhana, you can actually balance so that you don't have too much of heat or too much of coolness. Right? Sometimes you have to heat it. Like when you are in a slumber in the Tamas, you have to work towards actually building more heat. But when you want to operate in an equanimity, you need to balance both energies. So that's why we do the Anulom Vilom. So that sometimes, Anulom Vilom, sometimes you can actually mix it with Kapalabhati, like what they do in the Shavasana. But the real Anulom Vilom is where you breathe in and exhale, where what they would do is they would even try to put a feather. And the feather is not supposed to move, even if they put the feather under your nostril. So it's called Sukshma Pranayama. So where it is like, what the pranayama says, like, Biva Sukshmaha. You're breathing so subtle, yet long and steady. And when you do that, and if you can fix your eye gaze on the Ajna Chakra, it brings so much clarity and so much harmony within you when you practice the Sukshma Pranayama. Unlike what we practice in our class, where we do the Kapalabhati and this stuff, but we do that intentionally to actually see if you can get into a little bit of Chaturtha, and that prepares you to meditation. But there is also Sukshma Pranayama that you can actually practice before the meditation. And then the one that we do, the Brahmari Pranayama, which is, some people call that as a vacuum cleaner for your brain, which is like, what you do is you take an inhale and then close your eyes and then close your ears, and then just sound like a beep, like a Brahmari. And then it does this, like a Dyson robot. It just goes and cleans all the chatter within your brain. I mean, it's like, you can feel that actually, when you do the Brahmari Pranayama. Right? And then we do the Kapalabhati. Kapalabhati is the energizing and detoxification. It generates, removes all the toxins, and it also builds the more core strength. We also do the Kapalabhati. So these are some of the, and then we do the Sheetal. In fact, the one way to balance the Kapalabhati heat is to do Sheetali or Sheetakari after that. That also brings the coolness of the breath. So pranayama is a whole domain by itself. There are so many dimensions of pranayama. We can actually explore many different pranayamas. In a 1 hour class, it becomes difficult to do all these things. But what they also say is, depending upon where you are in your life journey, they basically say, like, for example, after you do 40, or 40 is this a number, some arbitrary number, what they say is you minimize your asana practice, focus more on pranayama and focus more on meditation. When you are young and the kid, you will probably spend more time in the asana, but you do that. But what we actually try to do is, we try to do the postures with pranayama. If your pranayama is getting compromised while doing a posture, that means we are pushing it too hard. So the golden guideline is to express any asana only with pranayama. That's the right way of doing it for us. If you are unable to do pranayama, maybe you're going too far in your sthira sukham, in your sukham. So maybe we can actually try to back off. But the rajas will always, tries to guide us, hey, you have the physical strength, why don't I go for the thing? But if you balance it with the sukham of the pranayama, that actually suppresses your rajas to express itself, find an expression, and use the power of the muscle to go push through. So that is actually another greater insight on how we can use the Sthira Sukham Asanam to guide our practice every day, where the right way to do a practice is to make sure that you first anchor on a pranayama and then go express in an asana. So that's all I have for today. Any other questions, comments? Ramakant Garu, would you agree? Would you agree about what we think as a guidance, where you should always use pranayama in your asana practice?
Always. It is not, I think, not just me, the Maharshis. In fact, while we do asanas, it may go to a point where if you have really done pranayama along with the asanas, you may go to a point where you may skip also, right? You feel so full that the body has followed the breath, right? Once that marriage, right, that resonance happens, then you're totally full. Right away, you are so ready with meditation. You would be so ready to jump into meditation.
Yeah. Then actually that asana, what Krishnamacharya says is, continuing on what Ramakant just said, then your asana expression actually becomes dhyana. Then you can actually be in the meditative state while doing your sun salutations. That's the perfect flow state, where, I mean, that's what we basically say, right? Which is what is the right definition of dhyana is when you are in the tatra dhyana jamanashayam, where there is no residue, because you're in harmony of the body, breath, and what you're actually doing is actually, and eventually leads to samyama, which we are going to cover in this. There is one other
similarly to add, right? Whenever we do these asanas, I've seen a lot of folks talking about putting this there, this leg here, and all, but the entire, like, you experience the fullness when you are in yoga nidra or in a still state. I think whenever you are in any posture, it has to be in that state. A lot of times we are holding either the face muscles or at the colon area and all. But truly speaking, sthira and sukha, effortless posture, you feel so settled down, right? A lot of people, oh, you're settled down in America. Oh, okay. That kind of a thing, right? So basically, totally settling down into the every posture, every move has to be so cool that it is totally relaxed. No shoulders holding on, belly here, there. Any kind of struggle is unlightenment rather than the enlightenment, right? Whenever you are into fighting with any posture. Right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what they say, right? Angalagavam, which is like, you don't become, you become unaware of the body. It's like, you don't feel the body at all, right? In your practice, right? Angalagavam, and that's something that we said, which is like, bhava pratyayo videhi prakriti layanam, which is like you transcend the body in that moment, and then you unite with the nature and you experience the oneness. So that's kind of the quick thing. And let's conclude today's session with a couple of ohms, and then we will wrap it up. Let's take a deep breath for Aum. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. We wish everybody to be happy. Wish everybody to be free of sorrow and illness. Wish everybody to see only auspicious things. Let there be peace everywhere. These wonderful thoughts. Palms of your eyes to transmit all this knowledge, to give us the right Sankhya vision, to see the things the way they are. And slowly, with a bright smile, open your eyes. What a beautiful evening. All of you give your Saturday evening. This is a party time in the party of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, and in the presence of doctors and yoga gurus like Ramakanji. What a blessing. And then, of course, all the seekers like Savitaji, Preetiji, Sajni, and all of us. Fantastic. Have a wonderful rest of Saturday evening. We'll connect again.
Dhanyavad.
Thank you.
Thank you.